Namaste. I am K.S. Ranjani, Assistant Professor, NITI Mumbai, National Institute of Industrial Engineering, Mumbai. It gives me immense pleasure to meet all of you on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Let me first begin by thanking Think India for giving me this wonderful platform, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Now that we all log in on a lazy Sunday afternoon, especially in the midst of a lockdown, so let me start with a small story. So this is a story of Krishna Devaraya. He wanted to know what is the most difficult thing to control, or who is the most difficult person to control. So he turns to Tenali Rama for wise counsel. So Tenali Rama says that it is a small child. A small child is the most difficult to please, control. Krishna Devaraya is not really very impressed with this answer because he says, I am a king and I am handling crisis, I am handling war, I am running a nation. Are you sure what you are talking to a king? So then Tenali Rama says, okay, let us test it out. So then they bring a small child. So this child starts crying. He's upset. So Tenali Rama asks him, what do you want? So the child says, I want a pot. So that's done. Get the most wonderful pot made, and the pot is brought to the kingdom, and the child takes the pot, and then he says, look, Tenali Rama, it's so simple. All this child wants is a pot, and now he stopped crying. And then the child starts crying again. Now what do you want? He says, I want an elephant. Okay, done. For a king, what is an elephant? So just get the best elephant. So once again an elephant is brought to the court, and the child is smiling. Now again there is a victorious smile on Krishna Devaraya's face. After a minute again the child starts crying, and then now Krishna Devaraya is at its wit's end, and then he's asking, what now? And the child says, I want the elephant inside the pot. So I want the elephant inside the pot. Now what does Krishna Devaraya do? Okay, he says, come on, let the elephant walk over the pot. So the elephant walks over the pot, and then the pot is broken. Now the child cries again. Now Tenali Rama looks at Krishna Devaraya. He says, okay, resolve the issue. Krishna Devaraya asks, child, shall I bring another pot? No. The child says, I want the same pot. Now, my dear friends, we have many such children across all age groups in India. You see where I am going with this? So there are children who say, this has not been done by the government, so the government does that, but then they say, what about this? And then they say, okay, this is done, and what about this? You haven't delivered to rich people, okay, done. You haven't delivered to poor people, okay, done. You haven't delivered to... Now what happens to the fiscal deficit? So I suppose you get where we are going with this. So I'm sure most of us would have had conversations, especially post-COVID, with a lot of people who are convinced and who have convinced you that the government has done nothing. Zilch. You must also have met people who are convinced that the government is doing everything. They're doing a wonderful job. So my dear friends, usually between nothing and everything is where the truth lies. So nothing and everything are states of emotion. Something, what is it something that the government has done? And a discussion of that kind, in today's time of information overflow. Why I believe it is necessary is because unless we start the discussion on what the government has done, we are never going to get to what else needs to be done. So, my dear friends, it's very essential that we start a discussion on what constructive actions have been taken by the government in the wake of this unprecedented pandemic that the entire world is witnessing. India is still fortunate to be witnessing it at a much more muted degree, but then we never know. We really still don't know where we are headed. We really don't know, whether there is going to be a recurrence of the pandemic. So it's here that we need to have a rational, logical, fact-based discussion on what measures have been taken by governments, both the union government and the state governments. So I'm quoting Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor. So he says that India has deliberately opted by a step-by-step feedback loop-based approach. So what we are witnessing today is a loop-based approach where we bring our responses in a measured way, address different target groups, and look at what each of these target groups would benefit. And we wait for a feedback, we see where there is a lacuna, where there is a gap, and where more needs to be done. So compare this to, say, more developed nations which follow something called a Big Bang approach. In one go, a large package is released, probably addressing all sections of the society in one go. This is also probably why a lot of people feel that not much is being done. So before I start off with what are the measures, let me just set a context, and then once I set this context, we will understand the significance of some of the things that we will be talking about. So I go back to October 2014 when 5.29 crore Jan Dhan accounts were opened. Okay, why does this number assume any significance at all? So this Jan Dhan account was a modification of what earlier was called a no-frill account. So the problem with the earlier version of no-frill account was the fact that many of them remained inoperative. So in October 2014, when 5.29 Jan Dhan accounts were opened, it was going to be the beginning, or it was going to be a continuation of building a resilience into our financial services system. By January 2019, I would like to probably repeat these numbers once or twice so that we get the significance. By January 2019, 25.6 crore operative Jan Dhan accounts were there. I mean, my key word here is operative. That means they are no longer dormant. Government was beginning to transfer money through the direct benefit transfer, and therefore these were no longer dormant. So please focus on the keyword operative Jan Dhan accounts. So we had 25.6 crore operative Jan Dhan accounts by January 2019, and what more is that we successfully converted these into very, very vibrant tools of liquidity for the bank, because the deposits in this account amounted to 85,494 crore. By January of 2019, we were having deposits in Jan Dhan account of 85,494 crore. So the most important point that I'm trying to, or a context that I'm trying to build here, is to probably, make the listener understand the kind of digital infrastructure that was built, the kind of resilience that was injected into the financial system, the concept of people going to bank, withdrawing money, going to bank, making a fund transfer, physically issuing check, to being able to do everything online. More importantly, diffusion of those digital technologies down to the last mile. So, my dear friends, I will just give you a few numbers which will once again make you understand the sheer magnitude and significance of what resilience this system has brought up. So, this resilience is when the entire physical infrastructure breaks down. Like today, when nobody is able to walk out of the house. So, just imagine that the bank has transferred, that the government of India has transferred 10,000 crore into 20 crore accounts, 20 crore bank accounts. So into 20 crore bank accounts, the government had transferred money in one stroke. So it is this context that I would like to set before I start talking about what all measures the government has taken for distributing welfare assistance or relief measures to the people who have been most affected by this pandemic. So now cut to the present day, which is 2020, from the February of 2020 till now, the almost the third week of April, when the entire nation is in either partial lockdown or complete lockdown. So package of about 1,70,000 crore was announced by our finance minister, targeted at a certain section of the society. So the next probably 6 to 7 minutes or so, I will spend time in discussing the measures targeted especially for the Antyodaya, or the last woman standing in the queue. So for these people, the 1,70,000 crore package that was announced was specifically for distribution of food grains, for direct benefit transfer into the accounts of especially maybe the weaker section, widows, disabled people, pensioners, the insurance scheme that was made available for the frontline workers who were putting their health at risk. So these were largely the measures that were announced by the finance minister. So what we would be focusing on is actually what has happened on the ground. How much has been really delivered? Has it been delivered at all? So if we are to believe probably some of these WhatsApp videos and all of the usual culprits, many of us would think that yes, nothing has been done. So let's just understand what exactly has been done. Are we saying that it is enough? Are we saying that no, we need to do more? No, we are not saying any of that now. Okay, I am going to let the viewer decide. So till date, about 32 crore poor people have received financial assistance to the tune of 29,352 crores in the entire package. Now, how have they received it? 5.29 crore beneficiaries have got free ration, food grains under the Anna Yojana. 97.8 lakh Ujjwala cylinders have been delivered. 2.1 lakh members of EPFO have taken the online withdrawal, of non-refundable advance, and the direct benefit or the direct transfer of 9,930 crores went into the accounts of 19.86 crore women. 1,400 crore was disbursed as pension to old age people, widows, disabled people, construction workers. 2.17 crore was received by construction workers. That amounted to about 3,000 crore. Another very significant and important development. I'll also shortly discuss a little bit about the food grain uptake of all the state governments. So, the top 3 states that have taken the food grains for distribution is Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Telangana. So, these are the top 3 states where food grains there's been an uptake of food grains. Some very significant and practically beneficial announcements also. The NGOs and charitable institutions, the institutions that have been involved in feeding people on ground, have also been allowed to directly uptake food grains from the FCI. So without having to go through any kind of auction process. So now this is extremely significant because this is utilizing, where there is institutional weakness of government. They have utilized other institutions, partnered with other institutions to ensure that the benefit has gone to the intended beneficiaries. So now this is about the Antyodaya. There are a few very important significant development. About 4.8 lakh daily wage workers in Uttar Pradesh have received once again direct benefit into their account. 1,000 rupees has been credited into their account. So people who have lost their livelihood, not just money but also a little bit of ex gratia has gone into their account. 1.65 crore families have been identified for free provision of rice and wheat in Uttar Pradesh. So several state governments have supplemented the measures of the central government with measures like these. So now this is as far as the very poor people go. Let me anticipate questions because this is not a medium where probably people can pop questions, though it would have been wonderful if people could have done that. But let me anticipate a question. What about the migrant labor? So the migrant labor problem was not anticipated to the extent that the magnitude of the migrant labor problem was not probably anticipated well enough. But today most of the state governments have geared up. Uttar Pradesh State Transport Corporation buses have been ferried to various locations, not just to pick up the migrant labor from Delhi border, but also to pick up students who were stranded in Kota. So concerted efforts essentially to bring people who have been probably stuck outside and require some kind of assistance. So you would have realized by now that I am mostly focusing only on the administrative interventions of the government. I am not discussing about the healthcare interventions at all. That is really neither my area of expertise nor the focus. So my focus is essentially on the administrative relief that the government is delivering to the people at this point in time. So we just discussed Antyodaya. Now we have another segment, that is the small, micro, tiny businesses. The small, micro, tiny businesses, no relief package has been announced so far. However, some 5,575 crore rupees has been processed as refund since March 2020, of which targeted refund of 5,204 crore has gone to 8.2 lakh small businesses alone. So this is to alleviate their misery, not to make them even comfortable, but to alleviate the misery of the revenues and the cash flow having completely stopped, but the expenses have not stopped because they still have to pay their labor. Another significant, let's say, fear that took over a lot of people was this issue of hostile takeovers. So many companies in distress all in one go, very, very little companies, all of them ready to be poached by predators. So then the government, as recently as yesterday, the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, they have come up with a measure, they have come up with an announcement. They have said that without approval, none of the border countries will be able to do any kind of takeover. Or in other words, they cannot bring any FDI without prior approval. So I see some questions. So I will just make note of these questions, and then I'm surely going to take these questions at the end. So this is for the micro and small enterprises. Then we had some macro measures announced by Reserve Bank. So I have a question here. Will the lowering of interest rates have any effect in the short term? So I'm just going to discuss the interest rate portion very shortly. So the liquidity that has been injected into the banking system targeted long-term repo operation that was announced by the RBI governor. That was the fourth installment that he announced. So the most important or significant aspect of the announcement was that it again targeted the most stressed industries, that is the housing board, that is the housing finance industry, NBFC and microfinance institutions. So the targeted easing of liquidity for these industries especially, so about 50,000 crore is projected to be injected there as assistance, as refinance. Then of course the interest rate cut. So the interest rate cut, which is going to be beneficial to banks in terms of making them more liquid, and they're going to have no more money probably to inject back to the system. Now these are in sum and substance. So in fact, I should probably talk a little bit about the state governments. Most of the state government measures predictably have not been for the industries or for businesses, but for individuals. So essentially, most of the state governments have supplemented the central government vision of not letting people go hungry. So once again, I can quote UP government, where as recently as yesterday, Mr. Yogi Adityanath has announced that even people without Aadhaar or ration or any kind of identification, anybody who comes hungry will have to be given either food or food grains. So state governments are supplementing. So this state of Kerala, state of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, so Tamil Nadu, many of the very, very severely affected states have all come together, especially to tackle the food problem or the starvation problem. So this is something that most of the governments are doing in tandem with the central government. So the one thing that probably when I was giving, when I was trying to set a background, I was talking about the 20 crore accounts and the 25.6 crore accounts. Actually, we have about 33.3 crore Jan Dhan accounts. So the significance of all this, my dear friends, is that we must probably be receiving a lot of taunts from many people, very, very well-meaning taunts, saying that South Korea is doing better or Singapore is doing very well, or, you know, I mean, rightly or wrongly, today is a day and time when nobody can show examples from Europe and US. It's very unfortunate, but they do give us examples from Singapore and South Korea, especially friends from Bombay. If I have to again, explain the magnitude of the measures taken by the government, if I have to give you a understanding of what really is the comparison, South Korea, the population per square kilometer is 503. Hear this out. And the population density of Bombay is 32,500. So we must understand that our problems are not comparable to the rest of the world. Our solutions, therefore, will not be comparable to the rest of the world. I'll just give you I'll just digress and give you a very small example from Mahabharata. So Lord Krishna has this Sudarshan Chakra. And Ashwatthama, he's a son of Drona. So Ashwatthama, he's son of Drona. He has, I now forget the name of the uh, one of the chakras that he has. So he goes to Krishna and says, let us swap. So then Krishna says, okay, fine, let's swap. I mean, the Sudarshan chakra is right here, pick it up. And Ashwatthama is not able to pick it up. So then Lord Krishna says, you carry your weight and I'll carry mine. So I think that's very, very significant in terms of solutions for nations, that we go with our solutions and they go with theirs. So there's nobody here who's doing better or worse, because we all are in this together. We are all here to learn from each other. So there is no question of India doing badly versus Singapore doing excellent or South Korea doing excellent, because we have to understand that our ground realities are very, very different from many of the countries that we would like to compare ourselves with. So I have another question. Has any classification been made between greenfield and brownfield projects for FDI restrictions? As rightly mentioned by you, protection of hostile takeover. So actually, the announcement is very recent. The announcement is fairly generic. It says any incremental investment as well as any new investment. All of this has to go through approval route. So there is no distinction there. Every investment now will have to go through approval route. So whether they want to buy out an existing company or whether they want to bring in new capital for a new company is how I understand. There is no distinction at this point. We should probably wait for more details on the announcement. So the announcement has happened yesterday. So now coming to this all important question of whether these measures are enough. So my dear friends, once again, this is a 130 crore population. Every sixth person is an Indian. 1/6 of all humanity walking on this world is an Indian. If you're looking at a family of 5 or 6 people, if you're saying, is everything going very well, I'm sure everybody will have a different complaint. So naturally, in a country of 130 crore people, we have a long way to go. So now that we have seen, especially the last woman on the queue, what she has got, and we have also seen what the micro, small, medium enterprises have got, not in terms of targeted benefits, but just some marginal relief. Like I said, simply to put them out of misery, not enough to get them back to walking. Now we look at loss of livelihoods, we're looking at loss of revenue, we're looking at loss of opportunity. One of the most fundamental thing is the differentiation between revenue loss and revenue postponement. There are several businesses whose revenues are merely postponed. Say a furniture. So if you're buying furniture, you would have waited in the lockdown period, and then if you are going to, you're not going to live without furniture. Once the lockdown is over, you're going to go and buy your furniture. Is it fair enough to stop FDI of China and Indian multinational companies? Okay, so I have some questions. I'm getting some questions. I'll finish whatever I'm saying, and then I'll probably take those questions. So when you look at, say, your household appliances, for example, suppose your fan has gone into a repair or it's broken down. So then you just wait, and then once the lockdown is over, you are going to go and buy a fan. So in all probability, most of these FMCGs, especially white goods, etc., they are looking at a situation of revenues getting deferred or postponed. But if you look at an auto driver or an Ola driver, we are not going to go after lockdown and then travel all the places we were not able to go in the lockdown. So revenue loss is a revenue loss. I think when any kind of assistance is given, it's very, very important for the government to make this very fundamental distinction between revenue loss and revenue deferment. And the revenue losses, my dear friends, they must go out as humanitarian aids. So assistance has to go into the account of all of these people whose revenues are lost. They're not looking at postponement. Moratorium on loans on EMIs is very fair when we are talking of revenues postponed. For expenses that the businesses have to take, for example, if they have to pay their employees even for the time that they have been locked out, even during the time that they have not been able to employ them for any revenue generation. So for all of these, most of the micro businesses are going to require interest-free loans. So moratorium is a very, it's like giving a lollipop to a sick child just to distract the child, because moratorium essentially means that you will once again have to pay interest on interest, and that is really not fair to people who have to put in their, otherwise their backs are essentially broken. So this is the second very important issue that probably the government has to look at. For all the micro enterprises, small enterprises that are paying their employees during the lockdown period, the government has to look at some kind of subsidy, some kind of payback, either an interest-free loan or possibly take 20-30% of their salary and pay it from the government end or something like this, because it is simply not going to be possible for the micro enterprises or the very small enterprises to otherwise overcome this period, and really even get up on their feet. So I just have one or two more points, and then I'm going to there are at least 3 questions. I'm going to take those questions. And then for the stressed industries or even for the non-stressed industries, government can consider subsidized interest rates. Somebody was asking me whether cut in interest rate will have an immediate effect. Yes, it will have an immediate effect. It will put liquidity into the business, and therefore these reduction in interest rates is very, very essential. So they are going to have instant effect also, not really in terms of a benefit, but in terms of preventing a imminent disaster or a lockdown or going out of the business situation. So it will just allow them a breathing time. So somebody is asking me moratorium provided by RBI, Ritesh Kumar. I'm just covering that point, that moratorium is really not a relief at all, because people will still end up paying interest on interest, and that is not a very fair thing for the people. So it has to be a waiver of interest. That means it has to essentially be interest free for at least, the intervening months, the 1 or 2 months that people are unable to earn money. I'm not talking of the salaried individuals. Will the move to extend the realization period of export proceeds provide greater flexibility to exporters to negotiate future export contracts? Yes. So that is the purpose, that to give a breathing time, to give a breathing space. So there was one more question that just passed by me. I think farmers. So farmers was one point that probably got missed out. So the first installment of the PM Kisan to the tune of 14.946 crore has been transferred to at least 7.5 crore farmers' accounts. So this is something that that is being done in the short term. In the long term, there were some announcements, any package for farming sector, there were some announcements actually about, or at least a line of thinking about trying to put income directly into the hands of the farmer. So that is one thing that's possibly starting now through platforms. A lot of people consolidating their demand, and then trying to reach a farmer or trying to reach an intermediary without too many layers. So that's something that is now slowly happening, but that's more a behavioral change rather than what you can say is a government initiative at this point in time. So this supply chain disruption that has happened how this will result in permanent changes in the behavior of people is something that we'll have to really wait and watch. So that's something that I mean, beyond the first installment of PM Kisan, and then of course reaching them out in terms of giving them these benefits. Beyond that, more for the farmers, we'll have to actually wait. The other thing, of course, is um, the relaxation in the lockdown, so that farmers can go ahead and not lose out on their harvest. So that's something that is also being thought of. That's happening. I do not know if I have missed out any questions in between. So if there's anybody's question, you can pop it up again, so then I can have a look. Okay, so why can't India provide a moratorium subsidy of 67% in parallel with Germany to protect salary of citizen in this hard time? Yeah. So surely there are a lot of things that the government can do, no doubt about it. But once again, like I told you, Germany's solutions for Germany, India's solutions for India. This is not to say that we cannot evolve common best practices. I am all for evolving common best practices. But the salary subsidy, moratorium subsidy, or a salary subsidy is not really possible for governments to give. Government can, at this point in time, in principle, they can compensate you for your losses. They will not be able to compensate you for your loss of profit or loss of revenue or loss of income, but they will definitely be able to prevent misery. So at this point in time, therefore, we all look at cutting out our losses, trying to maintain our jobs. So there are a lot of employers who are negotiating for salary cuts instead of retrenchment. So that's something that's happening not from the government level, but from the industry level. So any kind of moratorium is only a postponement, and moratorium period also involves interest on interest. So we might as well think that if it is possible, and if you do have the money, do not avail of the moratorium and pay it up. So I have another question. Central government should not, is it a question or a thought? Central government should not allow the decision to lift the lockdown by individual state government. So once again, I think the decision should lie with the states, mostly because most of the states, especially the ones who do not have very high infection rates, I think they'll be more cautious in opening up than the ones that have very high infection rates, because they have more to lose. So the government, the state borders will be sealed, no doubt. Movement will be restricted, no doubt. But the green zones, if you ask my thoughts, the green zones must be permitted to lift the very, very strict lockdown. The reason being, loss of livelihood will also eventually kill people. So people must be, it's not just about the loss of livelihood. There's another thing that if it would be good if we remember that most of us who operate with a laptop and with internet connectivity and are on our phone, and we create a semblance of contributing to our organizations and earning our salary, the lockdown for us is a very, very different situation than a person whose auto rickshaw is shut and he's just waiting there. When you ask him to go and eat from, say, or go and wait in the queue for a ration, the lockdown feeling is not the same for the two sections. This is something I think we must be very, very sensitive to. So the people who have a daily livelihood issue, if they are in a green zone, and if it will not cause a stress on the health infrastructure of the company at this point in time, then I think a phased lifting or a phased relaxation is more advisable rather than a complete lockdown, because a complete lockdown state cripples a lot of people. So that's a point. So again, I think in the meantime, I have missed out a few questions. MSME. So I think we just discussed the MSME policies, especially for MSMEs. Just GST, waiving off their fine for GST or giving them back their refund. These are really not sufficient measures. What they need is a very, very significant pumping in of capital, or allow them to continue their business with a lot of SOPs, with reduction in interest rates or soft interest rates, because it's not going to help if they are simply given their refund back, or just told that okay, your GST transgressions will be overlooked. No, that's not really going to help them, because we must understand that once again, they all have daily revenues, and their loss of daily revenue is not possibly simply a postponement of revenue. In all probability is gone for good, and a 3 month shutdown for a small enterprise is enough to put it out of business forever. So that's really an area where the government has to go the whole hog, and probably give them some very significant subsidies. Government must encourage Indian companies by reducing their taxes and increase taxes, fees, etc. to Chinese companies. Okay, that looks like a suggestion, and probably may not happen, but we don't know. We never know, because differential taxation, I don't know if, especially taxing Chinese companies, etc. That's more a public sentiment, but I'm not sure how there can be a legislative framework for the same. China and other FDIs are increasing stake in Indian companies. At how to regulate it? So we have just, if you look at the announcement as recently as yesterday, government has asked for the approval route. That means none of the countries that share a border with India are going to be allowed the usual FDI route. Now it is going to be specific approvals, and that is the only way this hostile takeover phase can be overcome by India. The second thing, the second possible a dimension to this is that if the back of economies are broken, if companies lose value forever, then poaching them is also not going to, in the long run, really benefit anybody. Even if it is China, if they have broken the back of an economy completely, by saying if they have, I am not insinuating anything. I'm just saying, if really, as we suspect, if somebody is even poaching, if the companies have lost their competence or competitiveness, there is no use in poaching also. So while the government is seized of this problem, and they are doing, they have taken a step in the right direction, which is that they have decided to go through the approval route. So therefore, this issue, at least for the time being, is being handled. So the valuation problem that we are now worried about, I think that we can rest a little easy on that count. Okay, so quantitative easing. So again, if you look at Reserve Bank, they are not going for any kind of big bang reforms. The reason being, we still do not know how this will pan out. So all the cards are not going to be put on the deck at this point in time. It is going to be a feedback loop. It's going to be slow easing. It is going to be little by little. So 25 basis points have already been cut. Banks can borrow at a cheaper rate. Banks can keep liquidity more easily. So if you're looking at any huge easing in terms of probably a huge reform, it doesn't seem like that's how the announcements are going to be. So at this point, it seems like they are going to be doing it probably sector by sector, or they are going to be doing it probably, after a lot of observation, because any kind of easing at this point in time without getting the impact of the entire pandemic. So, because we still do not know of any nations which have completely come out of it. So, the government still does not know how much more it needs to keep injecting into the system, what more it needs to be prepared for. So, I do not suppose they will go in for any kind of big bang reforms even after this. So, there is a 1 lakh crore easing that has already happened through various instruments, and I think it will continue to happen. And especially it will continue to happen for the stressed sectors. No, so Harsh has a question. The investment from Chinese multinationals, can they? So any increase in FDI or any new FDI? So they are all right now, so since the announcement has only come yesterday, it's a single page, it's a small announcement. The details are not there, but for additional FDI as well as new FDI, for everything it has to take the approval route. That is what the government has announced now. The government of Rajasthan permitted students to go home. So do other states have these? So see, 1 lakh migrant laborers actually have been, will be in a phased manner sent back from Maharashtra also. Then UP has sent buses and then taken people back. So if state governments are planning to send buses and then pick up people, possibly it's the call of the state. Probably they will do it. And most importantly, many of these problems that keep arising, the government will only take a call to react as these problems emerge. So there are no ready-made solutions for most of these problems, because the rest of the world along with us is facing it for the first time. So every government is figuring it on the go. So it's been wonderful. The session also turned out interactive unexpectedly, so I had quite a few questions. So it gives me a lot of pleasure, it gives me a lot of joy. Most importantly, in a lockdown, if you give a platform to a teacher, and if you give an audience, and if you ask questions, so then that's I think that's the best thing that's happened to me in the lockdown, that I got to speak to a room full of audience, and that too in an interactive manner. My classmate is here. How will the economic stimulus in US affect Indian economy in short and long term? If so, what areas will common man see those effects very soon? Okay. So for one, I am not for very big bang predictions, or, I don't really go into that kind of geopolitical predictions. But if I may say so, we have had these situations earlier. So we had a depression in 1929, that is just 90 years back. So the world still remembers it. It took 48 months for us to come out of the entire Great Depression. We had, in our recent memory, we had a 2008, a crisis, which again we took about 18 months to come out of the crisis. So we are going to, oh, thank you, Ritesh. So we are going to come out of this, sure, and how will the effect of US, India, and especially many, including Japan, many of the countries have announced that businesses have to be relocated to other places. Most of the world is thinking about de-risking their supply chains. Most of the world is thinking about de-risking production facilities, manufacturing, and all of this. So like many other countries, I think India will benefit. So if US also again looks at strategic cooperation areas, I'm sure India and US are going to benefit in the long term. But I I'm not somehow in the group of people who believe that now India will replace China. So I think that's really sticking our neck out, because India has got these opportunities many times in the past, and we have missed the bus on several occasions. We have not been able to create the kind of, we've lost out to probably Vietnam, to Indonesia, to many other countries. So there is no reason for any misplaced optimism. But yes, if you ask me whether it's an opportunity, yes, this is an opportunity. But how we will utilize it, I think we will know with with the passing of time. I think I answered this same question, that surely India has to view this as an opportunity. Yes, now all of us are aware of this, and Indian businesses are aware of this. So naturally, everybody is poised to take the advantage of the situation. But again, I am not going on the highly optimistic side, and I'm not going to say India is the next superpower. I think let's wait for that. Let's probably it's a good time to keep quiet and um, work on our capabilities. So I think this is the best time to do that. Okay, so this issue of withdrawing the approval to e-commerce companies, there are many, there is only some hearsay that they do not want to crowd the, yeah, I have a comment here from my aunt. She says she wants to be my student. I'm both touched, and I must say that no, I don't think I am that good. I think the people who are, our mothers, generation of mothers, they have faced very, very difficult times, and they have come out very, very creditably from lot of difficult situations. I do not think I have anything to any wisdom to part with them. Okay, the fact that my students are accepting me as teacher itself, I think, is a very great blessing for me in this lifetime. I don't think I should get greedy beyond that. So what should be the reason of, so this e-commerce, again, it's in the kind of, one of course is the local retail businesses, that is the mom and pop stores, which have been servicing a preference for the very, very localized supply chain at this point comes from the government, more from the health perspective. That is to keep the number of people on the road to minimum. So this is why e-commerce, especially the non-essential and all of this, probably the government feels that there may be a sudden outflow, that they may not be, it may result in one more migrant kind of a situation where everybody is crisscrossing the road. This probably, I think, is the reason why for now this is not really it doesn't seem to be the priority. So this probably is the reason why at this point e-commerce they are not being allowed to operate. So this is my sense, that they want to continue with the existing supply chains, which are highly localized and which can be controlled. So I think this has been very, very learning, interesting session for me. It's been really wonderful to connect to my students. There are a lot of people here who are not my students. They are kind enough to log in and hear me out. I'm really humbled by the response of so many people who have given a patient hearing. I think I'll take this last question. Who's the Tenali Raman in present India? Is this because you believe there haven't been any controversial statements and you would like me to make one now? So I do not know who is the Tenali Raman of present India. There are a lot of naysayers in our country today, very few who come out with positive solutions. But I think most of the startup enterprises, micro enterprises, the frugal innovation businesses, I think I'll call all of them as modern Tenali Ramans, because they all come with a solution attitude and not a problem attitude. So I think if you look at what Tenali Rama signifies, that's what he signifies. He looks for solutions, not problems. So I think the people who are the risk takers, who innovate, who come out with innovative solutions for problems, I think they are the modern Tenali Rama. I don't think banks are eager to lend. So, see, the RBI cannot make banks lend. Okay, so that is not possible. Though what the RBI has in fact done is that they have relaxed the NPA. They have relaxed the NPA recognition norms. They are not. They are coming out of the 90-day norm. Okay, so the banks are not under pressure to immediately mark their assets as non-performing assets. Now, having said this, beyond this, RBI is not in a position to force banks to lend. For banks to lend, the sentiment has to improve. So there is nothing that RBI can do except ease the liquidity. So it's not possible for them to force the banks to lend. However, like I was already mentioning, there can be a little bit out of the box thinking. Banks can waive off some installments, some interests. This will boost sentiments. This will give a necessary confidence to business that they can survive. See, unless business has a confidence that it's going to survive, it's not going to come to the bank asking for more loans. So if not from the Reserve Bank side, from a policy side, if there is enough boost given to these micro and tiny enterprises, if some sense of confidence is given to them that they can survive, at least the next 6 months, if that confidence is given to them, then I think the sentiments will improve, and that's the only way. Because you and I, we are not, if somebody is going to force us to take a loan, we are not going to go and take a loan, right? We will not take a loan unless we are sure that we have the means to repay. So it's the same for a business. Unless it sees a brighter tomorrow, it is not going to look at expanding. So most of them are now in the survival mode. Even more of them are in a mode where they just want to be put out of their misery. So at this point, sentiments are very low. I do not really see that RBI can ask banks to lend. But the government can most certainly ease the repayment pain for bank, for the small businesses, ease the interest rate pain for the small businesses, and then that's the way to go. So this has been, I think, a wonderful hour, at least for me. I'm very thankful to all of you for logging in, for your comments, for the questions. So I'm extremely thankful. I do hope that there were some takeaways from the talk. I thank my institute for encouraging me to do this. I thank my director, Professor Manoj Tiwari especially, for this encouragement and this opportunity. And I'm very thankful once again to Think India for giving me a platform from where we could have this positive exchange of ideas, a somewhat positive kind of discussion in the very, very gloomy, naysayers, doomsday sayers, who are predicting all kinds of things. So I do wish all of you a very, very successful lockdown time, a very nice, stress-free lockdown time. I also wish all of you very well in your future, and I do hope that our country, our citizens, all of us together, we are going to do very well and come out of this probably as we wish, as one of the emerging superstars of the world. That's my dream and wish for India. I'm sure most of us here in Think India are wishing that for this nation, that this nation must, find the best that it can. This nation must become the best that it can. This nation must become a Jagat Guru. So this is the dream of all of us. So Vande Matram, Jai Hind.